Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Connecticut Latino News Opinion Plus, a monthly series airing every Friday. This is a space for our opinions where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community is curious about. Today we are joined by Ingrid Canady, the Executive Director of the Education Resource Center. It's a pleasure to have you. Welcome, Ingrid. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Belen. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. I'm really excited for our conversation. So I'll jump in if you could just tell us a bit about the State Education Resource Center. What sort of agency is it? What kind of role do you have across the state? And in general, what services do you all offer?
Yeah. Thank you so much again. Thank you for the invitation. So let me tell you a little bit about the State Education Resource Center. We are a quasi-public agency that actually was founded back in 1969. And we were one of the professional development arms of the State Department of Education. And through the years, our services to the state have increased. We provide services to the whole state of Connecticut, 169 school districts, as I mentioned, as a quasi-public entity. Our services regarding education, supports, and services for all of the learning community. We also provide services to our families, and also we have a lot of our services to youth. So we are very excited about that. In 2014, the State Education Resource Center became a quasi-public entity with the purpose of providing support and services to the State Department of Education on their activities regarding equity and excellence in education. So, and as such, we work intricately linked with the State Department of Education. So we provide services, as I mentioned, to school districts, and we also provide services to communities, organizations, and a lot of the work is focused on supporting our children and their families in the educational setting.
That's amazing. That's such a wide variety. I was wondering, what is some of the center's goals for this year, since we're wrapping up with the fall, and maybe what are some new initiatives going into 2023?
Yeah, thank you. So our focus, because it's about how our children succeed in our educational environment, and therefore how do we prepare them for the future, we always want to make sure that we are at the cutting edge of what does that look like for us, meaning what is the next thing that's coming up in education. So because we work so closely with the State Department of Education in collaboration, we always developing programs and services that are going to meet the needs of our students. So regarding our goals, it's about making sure that our services are known across the state. Of what are some of the things that we can definitely provide to our families and to our children and our families and the educators. So the main aspect of our goal right now, we are in a transition, so I can make that public today. We are in a transition. We're actually going to be moving to the city of Waterbury. We're very excited. We are going to be located in what it used to be the city, um, the building in the Waterbury Mall. So we are very excited. It was the Timex Museum, and now it's going to be hosting the SERC main offices in our professional development classrooms in our library. So we are very excited about that. So that's part of our goal for this particular year as we transition, that we make this known to Connecticut and also to the city of Waterbury. They were coming in with a full library with all of our services to be able to expand and support what not only Waterbury, but other cities are doing regarding how do we best serve our students and their families.
That's really exciting.
It is very exciting, yeah.
So I'm going to take a little twist going into another topic, but really, you guys cover such a variety of things besides services. I was looking through the statements you guys provide, and really, you guys do a great job of addressing such important topics on a national and statewide level. One of the statements I saw was we're providing resources after the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Texas this past spring. And as someone who remembers hearing about Sandy Hook as a young student, I was like in middle school. It seems logical that the fear of mass shootings would greatly interfere with students' learning environment, especially now as it's increasing. I'm wondering, maybe from your experience and knowledge, what are some specific stressors, social stressors, that have specifically affected students' experiences with learning?
Yeah, so thank you for that question and for that reflection, Belen. So, just think about schools are created for these safe learning environments for our children, for our youth. So when our parents bring their child to school, or the child get to school in the bus, and the moment that they leave our homes to school, we have this feeling that they are going to be learning in a safe environment. So now these tragedies have definitely created a different level of concern for the parents, for the educators. And now let's think about what this do to our children socially, emotionally. Knowing that being in classrooms is no longer the safe place to be, and that we always have to be guarded and prepared what's going to happen. So if as adults we go through some of those, being nervous, if am I in this safe environment? So when we think about our young people, our children, it's traumatic. So what we're trying to do is to provide, the statement was a purpose of how do we create a safe environment, and when that doesn't happen, we're supposed to be learning. And for our young people, is they're learning to be the leaders of the future. They should not be concerned if what's going to happen in my classroom, am I going to get hurt?
Right.
And for some of them, when you mentioned Sandy Hook, when we think about everything that has, for the last 10 years, we've been trying to do regarding social emotional learning, and how do we prepare our young people to be able to understand, and how do we support them. So that's, for us, that statement was, at the core of the statement was exactly that. How, as a community, as a state, as a nation, we keep in mind the social emotional needs of our young people that now are afraid that this might happen to them. So how do we support the families, knowing that if I'm going to send my child to school, now I have to be concerned, the fear of a parent receiving the phone call, that text to say, this happened. So that was the core of our message. And then we wanted to provide some supports and services, some resources. So, how do parents can speak to their children about it, how teachers can find ways and they can talk about this in the classroom, because the reality is the reality. So we do not want any of us to lose our guard. We cannot let our guard down, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we continue to live our lives, to be in these safe environments, that we can definitely be who we are in the particular locations that we are. So that was the reason of the statement, and that's what we hear, that's what we see from the educators, and we have seen so many changes that have happened in schools because of those incidents. That now the parents used to go freely into the schools. Now there's so many layers, and it's for a reason, is the reality. So we just need to be aware of that and conscious of how to make sure that our young students are ready to learn, but also be realistic that we need to protect them.
Right. Well, it's really impactful that your organization is opening up this conversation. It sounds like you guys are really big on active listening to the
Thank you.
community, right? Because you provide resources, but you got to listen and know what to provide. So it's a great balance.
Thank
We'll
you.
definitely be including related resources, and I'll add that page to the web doc below to this. But I want to get to our other questions.
Sure.
You guys also, I got some heavy questions for you guys, but I appreciate it. So the agency, you guys also published a statement addressing racial violence across the country, which is another really big issue that affects students, especially Latinx, obviously students of color. So it was addressing the racial violence across this past spring after the 2022 Buffalo mass shooting. And the letter stated that dismantling systemic racism is an obligation right in front of us, not only as staff of the State Education Resource Center, but within our duty as educators, citizens of this nation, members of the global community, and human beings. I really loved that line.
Thank you.
It was really beautiful. As the letter said, this is about systemic racism across the entire nation. In your opinion, what might entities like yours, or schools, or communities as a whole, how can we start to address such an extensive danger?
Yeah. Thank you for that question, and thank you for your research regarding our organization. So I truly appreciate that. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier, Belen, is about CERC's ability to listen and to be able to not only listen to us as an organization, but what our educators are saying, what our students are saying, what our community is saying regarding what are the particular needs. So when we developed that particular statement regarding systemic racism, CERC has been for the last 2 decades, for over 20 years, have been focusing on how do we isolate race from the discourse of education to understand the implications that systemic practices of injustice have on the needs of our children and their families, specifically for success. So when we say that this is systemic, is we need to be very aware and conscious that oppression lives at a systemic level. And in order to be able to address the systemic level, we have to do it also personally. We need to be aware that it exists and how it impacts each of us individually, and then how to impact our children, children of color, children that are learning English, indigenous children. We need to make sure that we understand that and are clear about it. Because if we don't do that, we will continue to perpetuate those practices that might be creating oppression for the families and for our children and the families that we're supporting. So we are very open about it. Our website provide information about who we are as an organization, when that we made that intentional commitment to address systemic racism at its core. And how do we do that? By engaging in courageous dialogue. We need to talk about it, and we also need to develop action about it. Just because we're going to talk about it, we know it exists, we know it's there, we know the disparities, but we also need to be very clear that there needs to be an action. So how do we develop that action? That's our efforts. That's CERC's effort. How do we bring together a community of learners and communities in general and begin to engage in racial discourse for healing and hope? Because that's at the core of it. As humanity, we need to believe there is hope for change and transformational change at that, and we need it. We need it for our children, we need it for our families, and we need it for our future.
Right. That was a great explanation. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I was wondering, where can students and families go for sort of supportive or informative resources related to this?
Sure. So one of the things that I regret to mention earlier is that CERC also, we have a library, actually a specialized library, a physical library. So what I will recommend is that as a resource to visit our library website, and right there we have resources about every single topic that we discussed today. And then those resources link to other organizations that provide support. So this is it can be for students, for families, for educators. So I definitely recommend to visit our library so that you have an access to a plethora of resources, physical materials, and also website resources as well. So I will say that it's a little bit of a plug that I'm doing, but it's just like we link the resources that other organizations have to our library as well. So I just want to make sure that it's like we curate resources so that families, students, and community can go and access that information.
That's amazing. That's incredibly helpful. Yeah,
Sure.
there's so many like organizations in Connecticut. It can be hard to sort of figure out who does what and who provides what. And having a physical space is definitely accessible as well. So
Thank you, Belen. And I also wanted to mention that our organization received a grant for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. And we are also in our library, we are actually going to be hosting the School-Based Center for Prevention, Education, and Advocacy. So that's more resources that we're going to be providing to the community. So it's a wonderful partnership that we also have with the Department of Mental Health, as well with the State Department of Education.
oh, that's really exciting. Sorry, did you say it was like meetings or?
It will be actually resources, and we provide information to school districts as well regarding mental health.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll include all this information in the web doc.
Fantastic.
We had a great conversation. Time flew by. So that unfortunately was our last question. I mean, If you do have any other resources you want to plug quickly, you can go for it. But we'll definitely include everything along with this video.
I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity, and again, just encourage to visit the SERC library. We have great resources, and then that will link you to other organizations as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for talking with us. I appreciate it.
Un placer.
Well,
thank you.
anytime. Everyone, please tune in next month for another episode. You can follow us on Twitter at Connecticut Latino News and Instagram at Connecticut_Latino News. I'm Belen Dumont with Connecticut Latino News Opinion Plus, and I will see you all next time.